This is Jim Grindle. Jim was a close friend and classmate of James Dean. I had the opportunity to sit down for an interview in their hometown of Fairmount, Indiana. And Jim starts by telling us how he met James Dean.
I first met Jimmy right after his mother's death, and we started the fourth grade together out at a little school called Westboard. It was the original Fairmount Academy, and it closed for years, and then it reopened, and when it reopened, I think our class was the first class in the old school. And it was such a big class that we had. I think there were 10 boys in my class, and there were 3 classes in one room. So it gives you some idea of the size of the school itself. But we met Jimmy, came in, we knew about his mother's death, and I think everyone kind of, we felt sorry for him. So we kind of went out of our way to be nice to him, and then realized later on it really didn't take that. Jimmy was a likable kid anyway. So that's kind of how we got started.
When you guys were kids, what was he like in school?
Later on in high school, if you can believe this now, Jimmy was a quiet kid, a little bashful, a little timid. That sounds hard to believe, but he was a competitor. He was usually good at about anything he tried. I can remember we were in art class together, and of course there was about 4 of us boys that were pretty decent in art. Well, Jimmy was also very good in art. Did a lot of drawings and paintings and that type of thing. And matter of fact, we were showing my senior chords, a picture of my senior chords to some people yesterday, and realized probably between Jim and I, we painted most of the senior chords. What it mean by painting? We paint caricatures on the legs, and of course had Fairmount Quakers up down the back, and the basketball players, and just a little bit of everything.
When it came to summer breaks, what did you guys do in the summers?
Well, of course, Jimmy was on the farm, and summertime I worked with my father, who was a builder, so that kind of kept us apart. But some of the things, even before the summer came out, we would go out to the farm, out to Jimmy's farm. Do you notice I call him Jimmy because that's what we went by as a high school. It wasn't James. We didn't hear about that, but
I noticed everybody around here refers to him as Jimmy.
Yep.
You know.
It was quite funny. We had, my name Jim, and I went by Jim, and Jim went by Jimmy. And I'm trying to think, we had another Jim, I think. I was on the basketball team, and he went by Jim. No, he went by KY. That's right. But we all had nicknames for each other back then too in high school. And it seemed to be a big deal. We called each other by our father's name. You know, we called Jimmy. He was Rack, and they called me Jake. That was my father's name. Just silly things like that.
Now you were a teammate with him in sports. Mm-hmm. How many different sports did you guys play?
Well, I didn't play baseball because I worked in the summertime. That was a summer job. But we played basketball, ran track together. In fact, we were on the same relay team. I ran high hurdles, and Jimmy pole vaulted. And see what else he did. Well, we ran the half-mile relay team together. Jimmy was a pretty good athlete, but he wasn't very fast. So he didn't really run the dashes. He would be in more like long jump. We called it broad jump back then. Mm-hmm. And pole vault. I think he was our pole vaulter that year. I can't recall his height he went, but it seemed to me it was 10 feet or something that similar to that.
I know he did a lot of plays at school, right?
Yes.
And Adeline was the one Adeline Knoll was the one that saw the talent in Jimmy the
Yeah.
first. And
Yeah.
why don't you tell us a little about Adeline Knoll and what kind of lady she was?
Well, I could kind of mix Adeline with a little bit of humor and a little bit of seriousness and a little bit of this and that, because Adeline she was a lot of fun. And just kind of show you what kind of fun she was, we had her, I say we, our class had her, the fifth period was right after lunch. Well, before lunch, a couple or three of us would go up the stairway behind the auditorium and get up on the old fire escape and lean over and raise this big old window, crawl through it, come down through the auditorium, up through the stage and back through her room and open her door. And by the time she got there, why, of course the door would be wide open and the kids would be going in and out and so forth. And she'd say, "Did I leave that door open again?" Well, she knew, you know, she knew what she did. She might as well just left it open to start with, but she knew we got into it every day. Every day it was the same thing. But she'd say the same thing. "I forgot and left that door open," you know. But she knew. She's a fun gal. You know, I can recall some of the things that took place in our speech class. And Jimmy was one of them. Of course, the boys always had to sit on the front row because so Adeline could keep her eye on us, you know, got kind of mischievous. One day we were having speaking classes, and one of the girls was up in front, and she wore her brother's blue jeans. Well, back then, blue jeans weren't like they are today, you know. They weren't popular like in high school. Girls wore dresses. But she had these pair of blue jeans on, and they were unbuttoned in the front. So she's up there giving her speech, you know, and you know, she's unbuttoned, you know, and he passed it on and on down. There's a whole bunch of boys. We got to laughing. Adeline come up there. She says, "All right, you clowns, out of here." So she kicked us all out of class. Then she told Wilma Jean later. She said, "You know what they were laughing at?" "No." "Well, your pants are unbuttoned." Oh, that embarrassed her, you know. But that was just a typical class in Adeline's class. But she got serious. Had some good plays. And Jimmy excelled in that. He was a good actor. There's no getting around that. He was serious. The rest of us were not.
Well, I know that at the memorial service, this last one, you mentioned about how he made the Frankenstein.
Oh yes.
That picture of him as Frankenstein is just incredible. I mean, he looks like Frankenstein.
Yeah, he does.
And I guess it just shows the degree of how serious he took things.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, when he got this part, he came to art class, and I helped him make this out of paper mache. He was stacking on top of his head and just kept building and building. And of course, he had a mirror there, and he's watching so forth, all this. And the hair itself, as I recall, was painted. We painted black well back then. And I think we probably used a pastel color to paint it, but that's how that was made.
Did he keep in contact with you after he first went to New York and that?
No.
No?
We lost contact. I was telling Mark there a little bit ago. After we got out of high school, see, he went to, I think, New York. I can't recall where he went, New York or California. I don't remember.
Yeah, I think he went to California first.
Okay,
is
for
what it
school?
was. And then I think it was Whitmore that advised him to go to New York.
Okay.
You know, for the acting.
But I lost track of him until saw him in the movies. Somebody say, "Hey, Jim's on so and so on television tonight." Well, television was very young way back then, you know. But the part I saw him in, he had a part in Danger. It was a 15-minute thing. He was on. I seemed to be like it was once a week, and you know, we just crowd around. You had to see Jimmy on. But that's something, you know, hometown kid. And,
yeah, I was going to ask you
exactly.
if you saw many of his TV things.
Yeah.
Because he did. I was, you know, when I read about all the work he did in television, you know, there's almost 50 programs.
Oh,
he did.
yeah, yeah.
And then in Broadway, you know, there was a few plays, but these programs, you know, he had to learn entire scripts in a couple of days.
Yeah.
And, you know, because they were shot live. And I was just wondering if you'd ever seen any of them and what you thought. And
Oh,
here's
oh.
Jimmy, you know, and
Oh,
he's
yeah.
on TV.
Well, it's just kind of, you know, you sit here and you know this guy, and here he is on the screen. Wow, that's great. That's something different.
What was it like the first time you saw him on the movie screen?
Well, just kind of unbelievable on my part that I actually knew a movie star up there on the screen, and it was my friend or our friend. You know, I didn't say mine. He was our friend. But just kind of unbelievable, really.
Adeline must have been pretty proud of that. Huh?
Oh, I'm sure, yeah, yeah.
Because she pretty much ran the memorial for years, didn't
Yeah.
she?
Yep. Adeline was a character.
Did you ever meet Kenneth Kendall? Or?
No, no.
Oh, okay.
I have recently met another Kendall who is a sculptor, and he sculpts in bronze. As a matter of fact, I don't know whether you've had the opportunity or not, but he sculpted the 1812 statue of the Indians way back when, and this guy is so good, you can actually see the wind blow into these people's face that they're walking. Oh, it's fantastic. You got to see that. But anyway, if you don't mind me saying this, we're trying to put together a statue.
Yeah, tell us about
Okay.
that.
I've had contact with him. His name is Kendall. He's really out of Sweetser, Indiana, over here, about 5 miles west of Marion. And anyway, I talked to him at great length a while back, and got some prices and so forth of what he would build a bronze statue. So what we're doing, we're selling brick for $100 a piece, and we're going to put it right in front of the museum. Going right in front of the railing there on the porch.
Yeah.
To the south of the walkway going up. We're going to brick all that grass out in front, and Jimmy's going to be on a pedestal, and he'll be life size, his actual life size. And people would like to get involved in this can send their $100 donation in to the museum, just Fairmount Historical Museum, and put on their check what it's for, so forth. It's for a statue of Jimmy Dean, and in return we will send them a certificate of appreciation, and it'll be signed by some of the members of the museum, and make it authentic and so forth. And we really think it's going to be a fantastic thing, because what we're trying to do after all this time, bring Jimmy back home where he belongs.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful idea. I know you brought it up at the memorial, and you know, I just thought it was just a great idea.
Yeah.
And
we're getting some pretty good response already.
what about his image as a rebel? I know I asked this of Marcus, but what do you think about that?
Well, this is all an act of Jimmy. I'd say he was not a rebel, but he could act the part. Now, what I think about this, Jimmy, in his acting, I think he changed the world. I'm very sincere about this. But his acting, and you can relate to this too. There's a little bit of rebel in all of it.
Sure. Yeah.
And this, when that came on the screen, all the young people could relate to that. They relate to it yet today. And I think it actually changed the world. It changed some of the things that a kid could do, because back then, we were pretty limited to what we could get by with, so to speak.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the first movie I saw was Rebel. And I saw it, I think I was 13, 14. I saw it late night on TV. And I was kind of amazed that, that back in the 50s that they got this rough, It was a pretty rough movie
Yeah.
for the 50s,
Yes.
And, but that's the first time I saw James Dean, and he just, there was just something about him that grabbed you.
He just kind of
Yeah,
draw.
he
Yeah.
just got a hold of
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
and
He did that.
then I saw Giant. I just wished he had been in it more, but still he was great in Giant. But I didn't see East of Eden until, I don't know, about a year or so ago.
Mm-hmm.
And when Rachel bought the new release that Warner's put out of the three movies. And I think that's probably my favorite. Which one do you think's your favorite?
I've been asked this many times. Of course, I kind of like Rebel, but the same token, he was so good in East of Eden.
Yeah.
And I'm with you about his part in Giant. I think he should have been the main. He should have been the main character rather than the story about something else. Which, well, actually, I guess it was about him, but the same token, I think he should have been in it more.
Yeah, I do
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Well, there was probably footage that was cut, that they
I'm
didn't
I'm
put in
sure.
there.
But don't you wonder what he would have been like today?
Well, I just wonder what kind of film. I wonder what kind of a director he would have been.
Oh,
'Cause
he'd have been great.
When you got a 16 millimeter Bolex camera of your own, that pretty much means you want to start directing something. He's out
Yeah.
there making these little films, and I was just curious. That's one thing that really has my curiosity is
Yeah.
what kind of
What he would have
movies he
been.
would have directed, and just what would have come out of him.
I think he would have been very similar. Clint Eastwood, my way of thinking, has probably followed up where Jimmy left off, you might say, because Clint is on probably the same pattern that Jimmy was on, I believe. We were talking, I think, earlier about some of the things we did out at the farm. So in the wintertime, you go in the barn and you play basketball, and it's kind of an odd barn to play basketball in, but you play basketball, you play any place, you play on the side of a building outside if you got a hoop out there. But when you got someplace inside to go, and there's several barns around at the time that we could go into on Sunday afternoon, this type of thing. But some of the things we did was climb up through the hay, and Jimmy had made tunnels up through the hay, and you work your way up. Sometimes it'd be on the outside where you could stand on some of the cross members there, of the siding cross members, and elevate yourself on up, get in, and then you go parallel across. Of course, it'd be dark. You just go by feel wherever you're going, and the first thing you know, you see some light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, and run across fuzzy things in there, and you didn't know what you had your hands on. It turned out to be kittens, that type of thing. We ice skated around behind the house. In fact, the old pond is still there. We'd ice skate, go out there in the wintertime and have class parties and build a bonfire and cook hot dogs, that type of thing. A lot of fun. Whatever kids do today, we did way back then too.
What do you think Jimmy would think of the impact he's had on the world?
I think Jimmy would probably kind of chuckle at it, that's about all. Because I really don't think he would get to swell it. I really don't. I don't think Jimmy was that. The reason I say that, he was back here. I've got to put this in perspective, but he was back here, I think it was in February, after he'd made a film. And we got together, and he wanted to go out. I said, let's go so-and-so. And I said, hey, man, I said, I'm married, have a family. I have a little girl. And Jimmy said, well, can we go down and see him? I said, well, yeah, let's go to my house and see my little girl. So meet my wife, of course he knew my wife. And so we went down there, and my little girl now was she had to be about 3 months maybe, or 4 months, maybe something like that. And she just wiry enough that she liked to, so I'd kind of toss her over to Jimmy, and we stepped back, and we tossed her in the air and back and forth, and she loved it. She just screamed. She really dearly loved it. So, tongue in cheek, I told my daughter later on in life, in fact, she still teaches gymnastics, that Jimmy got her started in gymnastics. But the reason I say that he would probably slough it off or just kind of grin at it, he never really mentioned particularly what he was doing. We just talked about old times, that thing. But he was never, I don't think he was ever particularly big-headed about being a star. That's just Jimmy, I think.
How did you find out he had died? What kind of impact did that have on you?
Well, that was I joined the state police. I'd been going to school, and I was actually selected to be an Indiana State police officer. So that was my second day on the job when Mother called and said that Jimmy had just gotten killed in California. And you're kind of stunned when you realize he was my classmate, you know. How suddenly that life could be taken away from somebody you know. It was kind of, it was sad, of course, but it was kind of a shock, really, that it happened. And I couldn't come back for his funeral even, but it's a regimented outfit, and back then we were restricted to our barracks until we got our first month or so on. So, you know, here I am. I couldn't even come home to see my friend buried.
So why do you think he's still popular to this day?
Well, I still believe that it's because of his role in Rebel. He was such an actor. He could take on the part, you might say, my way of thinking at least, that he convinced people that that's who he was. And I think today people still relate to this. I really believe this. I can recall several times being out his gravesite. Matter of fact, one time I was the marshal after I retired from the state. I was a marshal here in town, and his head had been stolen. And after it was recovered in Lafayette, when we brought it back, in fact, Mark and I went and got it, brought it back, and they put it back on on the tomb itself. And the television people were out, and we were talking about different things, and they were asking me, and I said, why don't you ask that kid right there? Two kids that came, I say kids, probably 17, 18, had came there from New York, and they were down at his gravesite, you know. So they went over and they said, why do you like Jimmy Dean? I said, oh, he was cool, man. And so that's what everyone relates him as being cool because of being a rebel.
What would you like people to know about Jimmy that, from your perspective, that most people wouldn't know?
Wouldn't know?
Yeah.
That he wasn't a rebel. He was an ordinary person with a tremendous amount of talent.